We have such a wonderful group of speakers here today, and we want to make sure everybody has adequate time. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Kat Cole. She's the former president of Cinnabon, yum, and most previously group president of Cinnabon's parent company, Focus Brands. Kat Cole is now the chief operating officer and president of Focus Brands North America, leading both the global multi-channel licensing division as well as the 6 brands. I didn't realize there was this many domestic franchise companies: Cinnabon, Annie Ann's, like that one too, Moe's, Schlotzsky's, McAllister, and Carvel, of course, overseeing 4,200 of almost 6,000 operations globally and all alternative channels. So she has a huge span of responsibility. Kat is an angel investor, humanitarian philanthropist focused on elevating self-sufficiency through education, technology, and access to opportunity around the world. She is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, member of the United Nations Global Entrepreneurs Council, and a mentor, board member, and advisor to emerging retail, education, and tech startups. Kat was featured on CBS's Undercover Boss, named one of Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40, and one of CNBC's Next 25 list of innovators, leaders, and disruptors. Her story of moving up from a humble childhood to Hooters waitress at 18, to a restaurant executive by 26, and global chain president by 31 is often shared as an example of the American and entrepreneurial dream. Kat is considered a leader in change management, community engagement, brand building, and leadership. Please welcome to the stage Kat Cole.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, good morning. I unfortunately, like so many of you, when Gretchen was talking, feel the resonance of the experience that so many women share. And you might wonder, what is someone who has grown restaurant chains like Cinnabon, famous for a pastry the size of your face, and a so-named chicken wing concept around the world, going to teach us about the shared women's experience around the world. But as we all know, lessons come from the most unexpected places. And certainly as women in the world and in the workplace, we share far more than we often realize. And so I'll give you a little overview of my life and world today, but what is most relevant, as it probably will be from most humans we connect with and speakers we listen to, is the story behind the headlines. The things that are the pieces of our journey that make us who we are, our mistakes, our lessons, and those that inspire us and teach us amazing lessons of what kind of woman and human to be in the world every day going forward. So today, first and foremost, I am a mom of a 7-month-old named Ocean. A little boy. You can follow him on Instagram, Ocean Irvin. He's amazing. I don't know what this is going to do to children's lives as they get older and their whole childhood is on film. But I just love being a mom and have an even deeper appreciation, certainly for the medical field and women in medicine, as I've gone through what was a very difficult pregnancy and childbirth and recovery over time. So thank you for everything that you do from the bottom of my heart. So I'm a mom. I am a wife to an amazing partner, a man named Daley Irvin that is a tech entrepreneur and that is an endurance athlete, and he rowed across the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat for 45 days. It's bananas. Safer than it sounds. And so I get inspired by him and my son, Daley. And that, first and foremost, is who I am, in addition to being a daughter and a sister. I have 2 younger sisters, and just a citizen of the world, and hopefully someone that can help people realize they're capable of more than they know. I am all that before I am the title and the job and all of those other things. But the job is pretty fun. So I employ 60,000 people in 60 countries around the world. We have 6 brands, 2,000 franchise owners, 60,000 employees, and 6,000 locations. And what is fascinating about that, outside of just the bigness, is that I have had to learn by running restaurants, working in a franchise model. So for those of you that are in a network or anything that operates like a partnership approach, I have 2,000 business partners, not 2, not 4, not 10. If I want to get something done in my business, I have to get most of them to agree, and I can't force them through the contract. And so what that has built as I've grown up in this business is a muscle of influence, of understanding that if I can share a vision, if we can see it together and I can align priorities and values, we can probably get some pretty amazing things done. And that has helped me as a wife, as a mother, as a member of my community, organizations, and certainly in leading businesses. I started in Cinnabon in 2010 at the end of the recession. So I took over this business that first and foremost is famous for a sugary, fatty treat right at the height of the Atkins craze. Which was awesome, but we also own Atkins, so we're a well-diversified portfolio. And trying to get them to do a Cinnabon-flavored Atkins bar, and then we have like the world handled. But what was so interesting about taking on this job was that I had to figure out how I could not only be confident and authentic in this role, but taking this business to a place that despite consumer headwinds that I just described, regulatory changes, literally sugar was being taxed in major cities around the country, and then coming out of the recession where people don't have discretionary income. And there are two things that people don't do when they don't have discretionary income. They don't shop and they don't travel, and all my locations are in malls and airports. Kind of a problem. So imagine the business challenge. Radical reduction of customers, consumers, for you would be patients. No ability to pay an expensive price for a treat, if you will. And the very product we sell is flying in the face of where nutritional trends and consumer trends are going. And so what would you do? A lot of challenges. And I learned so many things from unexpected places that I'll share with you, but that actually showed up in how I led and turned around this sweet treat business. First, I asked myself, am I comfortable leading a sweet treat business? What's interesting is I am a health fanatic. I invest in and advise what I call future of food companies, organic, food as medicine, all natural, food that I think is going to be the way all people can and should eat in the future. That's what I do in my personal life. Yet I was selling cinnamon rolls around the world. And so I had someone come to me and say, you're a hypocrite, right? On one hand, you are growing sweet treats. On the other hand, you're out investing in turmeric shots and people who are encouraging others to have food as medicine and women entrepreneurs and all these things. And I said, you know, I don't see it that way. I don't see it as I'm a hypocrite. One, if I'm going to really make an impact, I need to go where the masses are. Yeah, I could go start a small company and impact 2 or 3 or 10 people, but I'm investing, I'm putting my money behind those people. I want to go to the big ship, to the place where it's mass consumer markets and make it a little bit better. Because if all we do is preach to the converted, we will never change the world, right? If we only say, this is the extreme behavior, this is the only thing we should do, there are a lot of people we are never going to change. And I believe there is a place for people like me, which are bridge people. Not everyone needs to be a bridge person, but someone who has a hand in the world of something in the future, more progressive, something that's different where we want to go, but a hand firmly in the world of where many people are and staying connected. And part of the challenge of what's happening in the world politically, what Gretchen talked about with Me Too movement, is you have this feeling of if you're not with me, you're against me. And that has created polarization. And the world will never move if people are facing each other nose to nose. It will only move if we stand beside each other shoulder to shoulder. And so when I took over this business, I thought, how can I feel good about it? What can I do with it? And there were a few interesting things going on with this business. Some that you might applaud, but then when we think about change and progress, while I would have applauded it also, I realized it wasn't sustainable. So I joined the company and there was a project called Project 599. How many calories do you think are in the giant classic Cinnabon cinnamon roll, the size of your face, which feeds 2 to 4? How many calories do you think are in it? 2,000, 1,300, 5,000, 1,500, 20, it's like an auction. So it's only 880. Only, right? Rush out to the mall and get them. So I thought it was 2,000 when I joined before as well. So Project 599 is what it sounds like. I joined the company and there was an initiative to reduce the calories from 880 to below 600. But keep it the same size, because that's our form factor. It's what we're famous for. So to change that core thing would have really drastically changed the business. And we already had some little ones, but for whatever reason, they weren't selling very well. It's like goals, behavior, goals, behavior. So I joined the company and I thought, calorie reduction, that sounds super smart. I like it, right? It makes me feel good. And so then I asked, however, what must one do to keep a food item the same size but reduce the calories that radically? Take out the real sugar, take out the real fat, put in artificial sweeteners, artificial stabilizers. And so problem one was we were going to potentially address what the company believed was an issue, right? 880 calories. And in that effort, unintentionally create potentially another massive problem, which is now all kinds of other things. Which is worse? Real sugar? Aspartame. Lots of debate, right? We would say neither. Eat spinach. Well, that's not where the world's going to go. So I had to say, look, it's a free market. People are always going to indulge. What we need to do is first and foremost be honest and authentic about what we are. So I went on national television as a 31-year-old president of this brand and said, do not eat it every day. Do not. Do not eat it for breakfast, do not eat it for lunch and dinner and snacks. It is an occasional treat, but when you are in the mood to be bad, it has the highest return on deliciousness on those like discretionary calories. And what's interesting though is we developed this mantra, and the mantra was, so worth it. What is so worth it in life, in business? And it's about return on effort. It's about opportunity cost. It's about priorities and values. And what is worth what I am giving up in a moment? Dollars, calories, time, love, resources, support, advocacy, coaching. I mean, even though I'm talking about cinnamon rolls, this stuff is deep, ladies. Deep. And so I asked myself, is that calorie reduction so worth the trade-offs? And here's what was interesting. I find that in life and in society, and certainly in our businesses, with good intentions, people can get a bit focused on the wrong thing. And my company got focused on calorie reduction because they asked the wrong question. And here is one of my many lessons. Today, as things move so fast, research, technology, medicine, society, as things move so fast, it is less important to have the exact right answer today, and it is more important to have the right questions. Because the answer will evolve rapidly. And how amazing if we can be humble enough to be more of a question asker than someone who says, I'm right. I'd rather do the right things for the right reasons than be right in the moment. And so I asked this question, will it grow sales? Look, we're a business. I've got 2,000 franchise owners that have invested their life savings in all my brands, including this one. And I can do something that makes everybody feel really good, but if it doesn't put more dollars in their pockets or if it takes it away, I'm going to go out of business really quickly. And I have to be honest about that. So we were asking this question to consumers. If we reduce the calories, will you be happy? And the answer was, yes, of course. Who doesn't want lower calories? The problem is that was the wrong question. The right question was, if we reduce these calories, if you buy it infrequently, will you buy it more often? And if we reduce the calories, if you don't feel it is something you can indulge in, now that the calories are reduced, will you try us? 100% the answer was no. Right? You think about it. If I'm in the mood to be bad, I don't need you to tell me about it being low fat. But good work, good intentions were getting focused on something that felt good, but that actually was only addressing a symptom of the issue. Then I found out that we had these little products called mini bonds. They're not mini, they're just smaller than the giant ones, so we call them mini. And we had never made them consistently available, so the consumer was not aware of the option. The minute we launched it, bless you, the minute we launched it, sales increased 6%. It has the same high-quality ingredients, made from scratch like everything else in our bakeries and business. Sales increased. But the funny thing was the franchise owners were afraid of trade down. They all knew we had a smaller one, but they were so worried if I offer you a little thing that costs less, Are you going to no longer pay for the big expensive thing? And this, by the way, should touch a nerve for many of you. When we talk about business, cost of doing business, new products and services, sometimes the way we grow our business is to offer a cheaper, smaller, more accessible thing that gives people access, and then they become part of our relationship, our network, all of the things that we offer, and we can trade up or build the business together over time. But I had to lead through influence and go to our franchise owners and say, look, we're not going to go put in artificial sweeteners. I know you were all excited about a 600-calorie, 2-pound cinnamon roll. But it's not going to happen. But we are going to promote the smaller one because it is the right thing to do. Because I'm going to go on national television and say, I don't want you to eat this every day, but when you are in the mood, now we have little ones. And you can indulge more responsibly. And that is what I mean about being a bridge person. I could have launched gluten-free and vegan and et cetera. By the way, we tested them all. You know how many we sold? Very few. We do have a gluten-free recipe, though, and we launched it in a baking kit in grocery stores so you can make it yourselves. But because it's not worth my time. But it's fascinating because this is a silly example of moving an entire business in 60 countries to get people to operate more responsibly. And by the way, they became more profitable as a result because we did the right thing. And there were many other things that I did with the company to turn it around. By the way, took over the company. It had 10 years of declining sales at the end of the recession, launched innovative products like that and more, created strategic partnerships to bring smaller versions of the product to grocery and retail and other restaurant chains, and in 3 years, tripled the profit of the company. Bam. It was awesome. And there were so many things that I learned, and I'm happy to answer questions. By the way, I will take questions afterward. We will absolutely have time. There were so many things that I learned in my life that allowed me to lead in a way that blew everyone away. And I think what you might care about far more than the lessons in turning around a confection business is the journey to get there. So when I was about 9 years old, I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. As I mentioned, oldest of 3 girls. My mom came to me and said, that's it, I'm done, we're leaving. And what she meant was we were leaving my father. My father was and is a very good man, but at the time he was an alcoholic and a terrible husband and father. I'd been in 3 car accidents by the time I was 9 years old. 2 of them were with my younger sister's, one when she was an infant. And as I reflect, and because of my life's journey, I get asked a lot of questions, and when you get asked questions, you're forced to reflect, and that's such a gift. And as I've reflected on why me, why have I been able to do so many things that others find fascinating or interesting or unique? And it's actually because of the lessons that come from the experiences I have that are not unique at all. That many of you, again, fortunately or unfortunately, will relate deeply or have someone who would. One of the early lessons I look back on is the entire experience of watching my mother lead our family during such a tumultuous time. My mother was the youngest of 7. She had no means to go out on her own. She had been what was called at the time a secretary her whole life. And most of her family, as well as the family of my father, were drug addicts, truck drivers, plant workers, good hard workers, many of them, and the ones who weren't good hard blue-collar workers or junkers were in jail or jobless on both sides of my family. The only person on both sides of my family that had a fancy office job was my alcoholic father. And so my mom, for years, had people around her, women and men, saying, I know it's bad, but you're lucky. You're so lucky to have a house and cars and to be able to get your kids Christmas presents. How dare you potentially throw that away? So she stayed. And my mom came to this point where up until one day, she believed things could be so much worse. I should just be grateful for what I have and where we are. And we've all probably been there, and we know people like that. And gratitude is such a critical part of moving through the world and our time on this planet in a graceful way, but it can become an anchor. And it was for her, because she felt, how could I disgrace what others want so badly by leaving? And just one day things changed, and instead of saying things could be so much worse, so I should just stay and be grateful, she crossed the line to saying, just because things could be worse does not mean that I do not have the right, and in some cases with a family, the obligation to make them better. And so she came to me as a 9-year-old. The next lesson, when she said, "That's it, I'm done, we're leaving," I looked at her at the age of 9 and said, "What took you so long?" At the age of 9, right? Part funny, part super sad. And the lesson in that, at least for me in business, and what it trained in me, is that the people who are closest to the action, that might be a certain position of nurses in your field. For me, it's the people at the front counter serving the customer. Whoever's closest to the transaction, those people know what the right thing to do is long before the leader does. And so the trick in, right? Word, yes. And so the trick in life and business is to stay as close to the people who are as close to the action as often as we can so that we compress the amount of time between when they know what the right thing to do is and when we do. And sometimes that means the answer to fix a problem. Other times it means an idea that's an opportunity for the business or the family. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. But I learned that from my mom. We did leave. My mom fed us on a food budget of $10 a week for 3 years. And so I saw this incredible resilience. Right? This was not 1925. This is in the 80s. I don't know how she did it. Yet another example of the amazing resilience of women. And this was my leadership example growing up. And so I tell people who ask how or why you, or to tap into the Gretchen conversation, my whole life, people saying, "Wow, you're so young in this role, you must have slept your way to the top." How you, why you? I can very easily say, "Have you met my mother?" That's how, right? She did an incredible job as a leader of the family, and this was just my normal, watching her hustle. And by the way, with such grace, she never spoke ill of our father, ever. I was just the oldest, so I knew what was going on. And so I also learned a level of grace and courage and just get-it-doneness. I didn't have to read a book. I didn't have to listen to anyone. I just watched her. I didn't see her much in those early years. I was the father figure, taking care of my 2 younger sisters. And my mom always said, because of what happened to her, she was also a child victim of sexual assault, and a victim of sexual assault all through her high school years. And she said, "All I want is for my girls to be healthy and independent. Anything else is gravy." And even though she had to work 3 jobs, and even though she wasn't around a ton, and even though we were exposed to things that are far more horrible than even what I have described, we're all healthy and independent and fine, and we couldn't be prouder of ourselves and prouder of her. And I think to myself often, how she was and is that person for me. I sure hope I'm that person for someone else, right? Like every moment we have the opportunity to be that person for someone else, and it's our choice. We are or we aren't in any given moment. And it doesn't mean, as you heard this morning, being the perfect whatever. It does mean just doing our best to make the right decisions with the information that we have and giving ourselves what is probably one of my favorite mantras right now, which is permission to change. My mom gave herself permission to change. I will tell you, with all the love in the world, most of the people on both sides of my family are still in that situation. Some are happy, some are not. My mom gave herself permission to change. She gave herself not only permission to change, she felt an obligation and a passion to evolve. Because she asked herself this question that I have learned to ask in business and in life: if not me, who? If not now, when? If I don't take my kids out of this situation, who will? The answer was the state. And if I don't do it now, when will I, and what will happen? And that's a bad thought. And I truly believe, by the way, my father ended up going to jail, getting worse, and now is clean and sober. And I believe if she had not left him, he'd be dead. And so that courage, the humility to ask for help, we needed a lot of help, but the courage to make those moves, that is my model. That's how I became an executive at 26, not any other way. And it is fascinating to think of all the lessons that are around us. I did, as you heard, start working at Hooters restaurants when I was 17 years old as a hostess. It was just a waitressing job in Jacksonville, Florida. It's got a lot of controversy around it, or it did at the time. But yet I found myself in another position of people saying, well, you're a hypocrite. I've been an advocate for women's rights because of my mom and my sisters since I was a teenager. I've been on the board of directors of the largest women's director and development organization in the world for over a decade. Yet for 15 years, I spent my time in a restaurant chain that is famous for socially acceptable female sex appeal. Again, bridge person. For me, it wasn't about what we were doing, it was how. And if I weren't there, how would it be run? I was able to bring tuition reimbursement, medical services. I put more women through college in 5 years than any other hotel or restaurant brand, and many of them are 10, 20 times our size. And so it was about how. And when I was criticized and judged for where I worked, I remember a lesson that I learned from a mentor. I started opening up franchises around the world when I was 19. I had never been on a plane. I didn't have a passport. They asked me to go to Australia to open the first franchise. I said yes. Then I flew to Miami and got a passport. That way I could legally exit the country and went. And I've been in the restaurant business ever since. But I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was a double engineering major, electrical and chemical, with a minor in psychology of women. I wasn't just the first one. I was going to do it. But then I fell in love with traveling around the world and was traveling so much, I failed college. So I'm a college dropout. I dropped out at the age of 20. I do not encourage it. I speak to college students all the time, and the parents in the back are like, please don't say that. Please don't say that. And I say, look, my advice is, if you have a compelling alternative, follow your heart, follow your passion. I had a compelling alternative. I was traveling around the world at the age of 19, opening businesses. Who gets to do that? But if you don't have a compelling alternative, keep your butt in school. And so here I am opening restaurants around the world, and I'm in Argentina, launching the first ever of our franchise in South America. And the franchisee, who became a great mentor of mine, even though he didn't realize it, gave me this piece of advice. When you are criticized, he said, not if, when you are criticized, which will be early and often, instead of arguing, assume immediately the criticism is accurate. Just let that be your default. It doesn't mean you bow down and let people walk over you. It's a mental exercise of humility and learning and growth. If you first assume criticism is accurate, just for a moment, what it does is changes the entire framing of the response. If I assume criticism is accurate, and where I land because of that openness is, wow, you might be a little bit right. Maybe not all the way right, but you might be a little bit right, or all the way right. Instead of fighting it, I say, I want to be a part of the solution. I want to learn, I want to evolve, I want to grow. And now it's productive, and I haven't put my foot in my mouth, and I'm demonstrating grace and learning, and I grow faster than most people. But if I consider the criticism is accurate, and I realize, nope, it's not. Instead of fighting the point of view, I am grounded in the why it's wrong. And I remember when I was criticized for working for this restaurant chain for 15 years, and someone said, how can you do that? And I thought, are they right? Am I part of the problem? I'm advocating for women over here, and I'm growing this restaurant chain over here. It's just one kind of balancing out the other, and nothing's changing. I was open to that criticism and that feedback. And then I thought about it and thought, nope. I am so grateful for the opportunities I have received. You tell me who else is going to send a 19-year-old around the world to open businesses, continue to promote them as the company grew. No one. And a college dropout, and the child of an alcoholic single parent. No one. I wouldn't get through any of your HR screeners. Yet in business, I'm a sure bet. They gave me the opportunity, and for that I was incredibly grateful, and gratitude is a powerful thing. But on the other side, I was so proud of the things we had done that my gratitude and my pride outweighed my concern over what anyone thought. And that is what carried me through. But part of that openness to criticism is about checking in with my values. Am I doing things that at the end of the day, when I look myself in the mirror, make me feel good, that I'm proud of, that I want my children to be proud of, that I think speak to what I stand for? And my answer was yes. I moved on from that role. I stayed there for 15 years, became vice president of the company, doing $800 million in revenue at the age of 26. Grew the business, launched all kinds of things, casinos, airlines. Hooters Air was a thing. Look it up. It was a bad idea. Really bad idea. But I'm now FAA trained, and so, if you ever need anyone. And I learned so much, as you can imagine, from being in that business. More than we have time to dig into as it relates to all kinds of things. Judgment, resilience, confidence, the Me Too movement. You name it. I got lots to talk about. Maybe it'll be in a book one day. But then I moved on and ran Cinnabon, and my career evolved, and I started getting a lot of media attention, partly because of where I worked before, but also the age and being one of the only women that was a CEO. It was a very small percentage of these companies this size. And my mom wrote this note on my birthday card, which was the first of many, and she writes it on my birthday card every year. which is don't forget where you came from, but don't you dare ever let it solely define you. And to me, this still feeds this concept of permission to change, right? And it's what I apply to my businesses. I've turned around 8 businesses, and I just turned 40. And I hope that that experience, and not just being able to change myself, but change others, change their minds, to allow them to change my mind, the permission to change. But not just a permission to change, I'm actually looking for it now. And change is so uncomfortable for most humans. But I am looking for it now. And so now I spend my time thinking about, how do I ask the right questions? How do I ask, if not me, who, if not now, when? How do I make sure, bless you, that I have people around me who will call me out, who will criticize me because I have built the muscle to assume the criticism is accurate, first and foremost? How will I build trust? How will I think about, now that I have a platform, to make an impact? And I remember I was sitting in a boardroom once, and I watched a woman. She was the only woman in the boardroom. I was number 2. I was the second shiny penny added to the board. And I thought, I just respected her so much as a woman on this board. And she never said a word. Not once. And I thought, what a shame to confuse having a seat with having a voice. And so many of us, in every way, as a friend, as a mother, as a sister, as a doctor, as a nurse, as a patient, we all have stories to tell. We all have an opportunity to use our voice. We just heard an amazing, amazing example of it from Gretchen, right? We should never take for granted the platform that we have, the small or large audiences that we have to tell our story, and then be a part of the bridge, be a part of the solution. And I learned some of these lessons, not just from Cinnabon, not just from my mom or my alcoholic father, not just from Hooters, but also from the humanitarian work I've done in Africa for a decade. I work in conflict zones, so I go to where bad things happen. And I apply commercial thinking, business thinking to help bring better processes, but I learn from their entrepreneurship and their resilience and their challenges, and those worlds feed each other. Again, it could feel very hypocritical. Hyper giant commercial mass market world. I'm a member of the United Nations Entrepreneurs Council in conflict zones. That is not hypocritical. They are connected more than so many things are connected, and they should be more connected in the world today. And I am okay with fighting that fight, but I will tell you, when I'm with my humanitarian groups, they're like, you're a bad capitalist. And when I'm with my business groups, they're like, you're a hippie. And I am like, I am loved by no one. I am like, I belong nowhere. So some days I feel that I belong nowhere, but most of the time I feel I belong everywhere. And that's a beautiful feeling. That is a beautiful state of confidence and grace, to go through the world understanding I will not make everyone comfortable, not everyone will agree, but I am there for good, and I am there to learn. And I seek the true truth. When I used to teach workshops and classes when I was 25 years old, when I would go to the bathroom, I would stay in the bathroom stall longer just to listen to what people were saying. So watch out. And in most events, I say that meant I only got 25% of the perspective, because usually that was about the percentage of the female attendants, but I could hear all of you now, which would be amazing. But it really was about me wanting to know the true truth, and I never used the information for evil, only for good. I would come back from the bathroom break and miraculously address things they had been talking about, and they're like, she's good. And thought if you only knew. But it was, I will tell you, as we lead into it, I think we have a time for a couple questions. I will tell you what that all wraps up into is some amazing learning around what makes the most impactful and successful humans. First is defining success on your own terms. It is how you define it. If any of us live by someone else's definition of success, that could be set by our parents culturally, it could be by the marketplace, it could be our friends, family, or just as you heard earlier, what we put on ourselves. If we try to live by someone else's definition of success, we will always fail. We will always feel less than. So step one is make your own definition of success and own it and love it and be it. But the second is constantly watch out for this balance of humility and curiosity on one hand. You've heard a lot of themes of that in just the few stories and lessons I've shared. But on the other hand, courage and confidence. Anytime I have over-indexed on one versus the other, when I've been so humble and curious, I just come across as a student, and no one will follow me. I learn a lot, but I'm not making a difference. I have a seat, but not a voice. However, there have been times that I have made enormous mistakes in business because I have over-indexed on courage and confidence. And it was not checked by humility and curiosity. And those are the times I was a bull in a china shop. I didn't listen and learn. I didn't stay close enough to the people who were close to the action, and I made incredible mistakes. And so over time, my goal has been to keep this, there's no such thing as perfect balance in anything, just harmony of those characteristics. And if I can feel it, I can see it in others, and you can feel it when there's a little bit too much of that bravado and it's not checked with listening and learning and humility. And you can feel when you or someone else is just sitting back, learning, making notes, and listening, but not using their voice. And so I've learned that this combination of humility and curiosity and courage and confidence are, in fact, the secret sauce to the most effective humans in any role. And boy, did I get tested being a new mom with major pelvic floor issues afterward, with trouble breastfeeding, first-time mom. I raised 2 girls, but they were already 3 and 5 by the time I had to do that. This whole new baby thing, and when I couldn't hold my pee in, was like a problem. And wow, I thought, okay, I'm going to be courageous and confident. Well, I was a little too courageous and confident and messed up my pelvic floor a little more because I wanted to get out and work. And then I thought, no, I'm just going to sit and listen and learn. I went with my doctor, and she's like, you really need to be moving around a little more. And so life's biggest challenges do test us in those areas. But if we're sensitive to it, I think we can deliver. So I think we've got time for a few questions, and I have one more lesson I'll share at the end. But please, you can ask anything. If I can legally answer it, I will.
So if you have any questions, come on up to the microphone.
Bueller.
Please. Would you like to sit? Would you like to sit down?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we'll have you sit down. Come up to the microphone. I wanted to ask you a question. I'm not sure that you heard this question for Gretchen, but the person who asked the question about how do we protect workers in the restaurant industry, who was that person? Could you repose that question? I think it would be great for Kat to address that. Sorry, I'll make sure you right there.
Okay. Yeah, please.
So my previous question was, we're seeing the Me Too movement come to light in very public spaces, politics, Hollywood, et cetera, but we know that harassment's happening in everyday jobs, restaurant, construction, police work, et cetera.
Everywhere.
And are we gonna see this movement trickle down so that it is pervasive across all workforces?
So I think we will see it trickle down. We already are. And here's the beautiful thing, right? There's not more harassment or more discrimination happening in the world, as Will Smith just said. It's just being caught on film, right? And so the beauty of transparency, nothing sanitizes like sunlight. And having light shined on injustice, and with the groundswell of movement and accountability, we will start to see a sea change even in basic jobs. But I will tell you, we're going to face a different problem before it gets better. And the problem that we are starting to face is that because the accountability for the most serious transgressions has been so public, we are seeing an adverse reaction of men saying, I am now scared to take a woman out to lunch. Not all, but it is happening. And it's, wow, I'm so worried about that girlfriend I had from when I was 18 and I'm now 45 coming back and saying something that I did that might have been over the line. I don't know if any of you remember the Aziz Ansari story where, you had very extreme examples of sexual harassment, and then you had this that felt sort of less overt, but nonetheless was all a part of the problem, right? It's not understanding consent and communication. And this is a stinky onion as we peel it back. So what is going to happen, as always happens in major societal change, is the pendulum is going to swing all the way to the other side. And it is going to create unintended negative beliefs and behaviors. So I believe that there is a process of healing that society has to go through that includes holding people accountable, giving people an opportunity, amnesty-ish, to come forward and say, I was not perfect, and I want to be a part of the solution. And then having it's happened in every historical societal wrong. The only time there's true healing is when it goes through that process. And I think there are a lot of things in our history and society that still have not fully gone through that process, right? And so this is going to happen. There will be believers and advocates that say, me too, and there will be men's that wear the Time's Up pen. And you know what? They're not going to lunch with me anymore. And so there is, and this is where I become very unpopular, I believe there is a middle ground. And I think that's evidenced in the examples I've given. I think there is a place for accusation, for accountability, for transparency, and the extremes. There is a place for that, because without it, things don't change. But in the middle, there has got to be a journey, right? People have to have permission to be on the journey. We have to give ourselves permission to change if we haven't been so awesome at something, and other people need permission to change or they're not going to. And so we're going to see some problems. We're going to see a bit, and then there will be this small pocket of offenders that actually get worse because they're used to using their power and having it work. And so they're actually going to use it more because they think that that'll just keep women quiet. And they'll be wrong, of course, but it will happen. It will get a little worse in some areas. I've already seen it. Even in restaurants or construction sites, or that's where it will get worse fastest, actually, right? There's less transparency there, there's less accountability, there's less HR infrastructure. And then it will start to move to the middle. And what a few people have said that I think is so critical is that while this accountability is happening with adults, that the education is happening with children. So that as we move, we address the messy stuff here with people who should know better and be accountable, but in fairness, or at least in understanding, have been raised in a society where it was perpetuated. And so we got to address that while we're training people differently. And it's starting to happen in restaurants. I'm starting to see it, but it's going to take a little time, and I would expect we see some things that make us go, really? In the era of Me Too, that's happening? It's just the nature of humans. Great question.
I'm Christine So. I'm an executive in global health nonprofits. My question is actually very aligned to what you were just talking about, and it was really about Hooters. Mm-hmm. And in this, I get what you're saying about Cinnabon and mass market appeal and getting to where people are actually going. Yeah. A Cinnabon is an inanimate object. A Hooters waitress is not. Mm-hmm. And so you've answered, I think, a bit of this question in what you've just said, but if you could just go a little further and say, what do you see as the future of franchises like Hooters in a Me Too era? Thanks.
So it's, again, what I say might not be popular, and it may surprise you, but I guess take it for what it's worth from somebody who was on the inside for 15 years, so I know what I'm talking about. It will, bizarrely and unexpectedly, continue to embolden the women who participate. And I think it actually may do the opposite of what people think. I don't think it's going to accelerate concepts like that, but it's not going to kill them. Because even when I was there pre the Me Too movement, because of the concept, we had to do more harassment training, more preparation, more education than normal restaurants, which, by the way, had the exact same percentage of sexual harassment issues. And they didn't do any training. And so even then, the women ruled the roost. Here's an interesting stat. Until I worked for the CEO when I was 26 years old, every boss I ever had at Hooters was a woman. Every boss. That was for many years in that business, including executives. And that surprises some people. But if you think about it, it's just a math thing. Almost all the employees were women. And so you promote from within when you're growing rapidly. And so there was this bizarre undercurrent of women in charge at that particular brand and business that was very empowering and emboldening. And it is a reason there was so much good work going on beneath the surface. So I think it's going to embolden them. I don't think it will make them irrelevant. But here's what I do think. I think it makes them less edgy. Because they're so empowered, it's kind of like, big deal. They're doing what they want to do, and they're crushing it, and their moms and their teachers and their nurses and their these other things, and people are kind of on with their day. So I think it's lost a bit of its edge and cachet and that's evidenced in their sales. So I think that's where it's going to go.
This young lady over here.
Your story was really amazing, but I think the thing is that a lot of people around the world don't have the same story. So how do you have people that haven't been through the same experience as you build the same resilience? And how do you get people, especially like young people that are more privileged, to kind of feel sympathy for issues that don't directly affect them and kind of feel with ideas and also like feel confident enough to go into fields trying to help people even though they've never really been in their shoes? Like, how do you get people to respect you like that?
That's, not only is that a great question, I bet there's a lot of people in this room that think I've wondered that for my children, right? I have this conversation with my friends all the time. I had such a rough upbringing, and of course it could have been a lot worse, but I have just defined to your great observation of how that contributed to my success. And so what happens when life is like kind of awesome? And I've thought, I've got a 7-month-old at home, and my husband and I talk about this. How do we make sure he has the resilience that came to us because of things that we want better for our children, but that he still has those traits? So I'll tell you my thoughts. I will say it's an opinion, and it is so dependent on the person and the situation, so for what it's worth. I think nothing shapes character and humility like real-world experiences. And so from a young age, the degree to which we can have children being with others who have much less than them, and not just bringing them food or bringing them shirts, but doing something that is a mantra I have with my work in conflict zones, which is eat what they eat, sleep where they sleep, live where they live, to the extent that it can be done safely, right? Because it shapes perspective. And so I think one is deeply immerse in experiences as often as possible. And I do a lot of speaking at Wharton and a few other Ivy League business schools. And every once in a while, the students are struggling with what they're going to do when they graduate college. And they have this luxury of choice. They're like, I'm going to spend a year and just think about it and figure out. And I'm like, oh, my God. It's so to not compute. But good for them, right? Their parents gave them the ability to do that. And so my advice to them is go be somewhere where you are unpopular. Go somewhere where you are unpopular, because you don't know what that feels like. Even if you have been the most unpopular person in this castle that you're in, you don't know what that feels like. Go do it. Go have the courage. So I would say go be unpopular, go be uncomfortable, and then don't allow yourself, or people who have privilege, don't be so overwhelmed by the guilt of that you are immobilized. When I say don't forget where you came from, but don't ever let it solely define you. A lot of people think, because of the stories I tell, that means don't forget the bad place you came from, but you don't have to let the bad stuff define you. It applies the other way as well. Don't forget the good stuff you have, because anyone who doesn't have it would sure think less of you if you took it for granted, right? But it does not have to define you. Some of the people I know that are making the greatest impact in the world are using their privilege to shine a light and to provide resources and access to people who could never have it. And that is an amazing use of time, energy, and privilege. So those would be my pieces of advice.
Thank you.
I'm going to take just one last question.
Hi, my name's Carol. I'm an emergency medicine physician. I work at the Gaithersburg Center. My question might be an unpopular one. And it's about how do we support or empower our older men, our husbands, our partners, who have been supportive of us, but now, when, example, my husband watches the news and he goes, how did I become the bad guy?
Yeah.
And he's not a bad guy.
Yeah.
So how do we help them with that?
That's an excellent question, and it touches a little bit on what I was mentioning earlier, this unintended pendulum swing. So I'll just give you a few quick stories and then wrap up what I think is an awesome technique for us to use. And thank you for having the courage to ask that. It is an unpopular question and topic. So the first thing is, first and foremost, this is my opinion, is to not judge them for having that point of view. Right? No judgment. Good for them for saying it out loud. It is now the door is open for me to smack some education, like down on you. And so the first thing I'll say, and I had a similar conversation with my husband, who is an uber feminist, but he heard about these clubs, these business clubs being started for only women. And he's like, isn't that just creating the opposite problem? Is that really the right thing to create an all-girls club? I said, first, the whole world is an all-boys club. And then here's the very serious analogy I use. So first, the way we help, call it those more seasoned in their life journey, think through this and figure out how to be helpful, is first and foremost, just chill out on the judgment a little bit, right? Because who stays open when they feel judged? Very few people. So it's to say, I'm so glad you asked that question. You're probably not alone in thinking it. Definitely not alone. Second is I use the analogy of a scale. And if you have a scale, an old school scale, where the plates are tipped out of balance, one has a lot of weight, the other is light floating up here. How, might I ask, from just a putting weights on the plates perspective, do we get the plates even? Do we put equal weight on both sides? No, they won't move. We put more weight in the thing that needs more weight. And so what I ask these, what I hope are emerging male allies to consider, is that things are quite out of balance. And this, all that's coming up is evidence of that. And so part of the solution, not all of it, part of the solution is to first put some weight on the other side of the scale, which might mean all women's clubs and all women's events, because this is where we need to come to find confidence and support and examples and perspective. And maybe get the confidence then to go back to our multi-gender communities and households and businesses. And much as I had confidence, because all my bosses were women, I never had to figure out how to show up in the workplace. I had a quiet one and a loud one. I had an educated one and a scrappy one. I had women who came from all walks of life. And so my vision of what leadership could be as a woman never brought into question, what does that mean for how I walk and talk and dress? So I got to spend all my energy on the work, instead of wondering, will I be accepted? Because I already saw it. Think about the power of possible. And that is why I believe, and why we should help our male emerging allies understand that there is a place for women to come together, because it is about showing the power of what's possible, healing wounds potentially, giving each other advice, being advocates for each other in the way the whole world has worked for men since the beginning of time. And then we should use that. That's why it's not only the solution, to have more open conversations. And I would just encourage emerging male allies to ask more questions like that and be open to the answers and hear it. And that would lead me to the last piece of advice, which is all of us about being our own self-coach and helping others do the same, and it's the power of checking in. I hate that things have to blow up to their extremes for stuff to change, right? It's bananas, but it's human nature. But I have learned there are ways to overcome that, and one is about the power of checking in. Maybe that's checking in on your health regularly before something horrible happens. The examples are all around us of why this is a good idea, but we don't do it in our relationships. We don't do it as a society often enough. We barely do it from a medical perspective when our doctors tell us to. So my husband and I have this process called a monthly check-in. And it is where we ask each other 10 questions every month on our month-iversary. We have a glass of wine or a cup of tea, and even if we're somewhere else around the world, we never miss it. Never. And we ask ourselves questions like, what could I do differently to be a better partner for you? What has made you the most proud in our relationship, and what has made you worry the most? What has been the worst part of our relationship in the last 30 days, and what's been the best? Some people are like, that sounds scary. I'm not having that conversation. But I am telling you, when you have done it from the beginning, it's amazing. And so in life and in business, I use a version of this called the hot shot rule. And I'll leave you with this, because I believe my mom did a version of this in her own scrappy, unsophisticated way. She asked herself, what would a hot shot do if they were in my shoes? And a hot shot is whoever you think of it. Think of a Mrs. Potato Head of awesomeness, right? Like best surgeon, best anesthesiologist, best nurse, best mom, best blah, 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 all that, and bam, there it is. And you are gone tomorrow, and they take over your seat. Tomorrow. You have no time to write thank you notes and do all the things you'd like to do, clean up the desk, make the phone calls. And the question is, if someone with complete and utter badassery were to take over my seat, what is one thing they would do differently immediately? Because I am blinded by my own progress. Society is blinded by its own progress. Because some people look around, including our seasoned emerging male allies, and say things are so much better than they used to be. This isn't harassment. Let me tell you what we used to do. Right? This is the truth of what people believe. But they're embarrassed and scared to say it. But they think it. They think these people are a bunch of whiners. This is nothing. Someone in my very close family just said that. And I thought, again, I can't judge their experience. But a hotshot rule is this. I don't want to be blinded by my own progress. I want to get better every day. Every day. I want our society to get better. You want your practice to get better. You want your patients to get better. So how do you do it? You check in. You ask what someone awesome would do tomorrow. If they had everything you have, but they aren't blinded by progress, today is the first day in your shoes in your life. It is the worst it will ever be to them. Think about that. Your business right now is the worst it'll ever be if someone took it over. Your life is the worst it will ever be if I were able to be in your shoes. Because I would immediately view the things I would want to change for the better. And so would you if you had mine. And so the hotshot rule is simply this. We encourage others, our partners, our businesses, our emerging male allies. We ask ourselves and each other, what is one thing we would do immediately to make this better? And then take action immediately and talk about it. It shows vulnerability, and by the time you do it every month or every quarter, how often you do this exercise, you look back in a year and you have rocked it like someone who took over your life for the first time with fresh eyes. So I hope you will embody the hotshot rule and go back and think about my mom and ask, if not me, who, if not now, when. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for amazing philosophy. Really appreciate that.